Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our 2023 Active Transportation Program workshop. Um, we will get started in about 3 minutes as people get on. So just hang in there and I'll be back in about 3 minutes. Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we have a good number of people on the workshop, so we're going to get started. My name is Lori Waters, and I'm the program manager for the Active Transportation Program at the California Transportation Commission. And also from the commission today, running the workshop is Beverly Newman Burkhart and Alika Changizi and Justin Hall. And then we have our Caltrans colleagues in the ATP program for Caltrans that will also be available to help us out as needed in the workshop. So this is a workshop for the 2023 Active Transportation Program, or Cycle 6. I can't remember how many workshops we've had. It seems like a lot, but this is the last one for this cycle. So we're hoping to just get everything wrapped up today and be ready for guideline adoption at the March commission meeting. So before we get started, I'm going to turn over to Alika, who will explain how anyone can participate in today's workshop. Alika?
Thanks, Lori. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the final 2023 ATP Central Workshop. Our workshops normally take place in different locations around the state. However, containment measures surrounding COVID-19 have required us to adjust to a webinar format. Please bear with us should we encounter any technical challenges. For participants joining us through the GoToWebinar platform, please find the webinar panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will find the audio and questions tabs. Under the audio tab, you will have the choice to listen in via computer or telephone option. If you prefer computer audio, please select the appropriate box. If you prefer the phone call option, select the corresponding box and dial the phone number, access code, and audio PIN as directed by the automated system. Please note that if the audio PIN is not entered, you will remain in listen-only mode and will not be able to speak should you have a comment. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access this webinar. These cannot be shared with other participants as they are registered to a specific attendee. We welcome comments and questions from attendees as part of each topic at this workshop. There will also be an opportunity for comments and questions at the end of the presentation. There are two options for participants to provide comments. You may either click the hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment, then you will be unmuted and called upon to make your comment. Please be sure to state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. Also, please use the raised hand feature as early into the topic as you can to give the system time to acknowledge you. The other option is to use the questions tab. Please type in the topic you are commenting on and your comment. Commission staff will read the comment on your behalf. Thank you again for joining us today, and we appreciate you sharing your time and feedback with us.
Thank you, Lika. Okay, and we have till 12:30 today to get through everything that we had planned to cover. Okay, so next slide, Alika. Okay, so we're going over this slide every workshop just to make sure it's clear that we have 4 years of funding for this cycle. We do a new program of projects every 2 years with 4 years of funding. The funding years cover fiscal years 23-24 through 26-27. At the January commission meeting, Caltrans Budgets presented the draft fund estimate. Just so everyone understands, the fund estimate is a document that explains what funding is available for each cycle of the program and the different types of funds that go into the overall funding amount and how the funds are split up amongst the 3 components of the program: the statewide, the small urban and rural, and the metropolitan planning organization components. And when the draft fund estimate was presented, it showed about 38 million in additional federal funding per fiscal year from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which brought the overall funding to about 597.5 million. The fund estimate has been revised since then, and that number, from what we've seen in draft form, is closer to 650 million. But Caltrans Budgets and with others is still working on finalizing those numbers. So that's why we haven't changed the slide yet, because we don't know for sure what the funding availability will be. We think it's going to be more than that 597.5 million and might be up to the 650 million, but I hesitate to put out a specific number quite yet until Budgets is very comfortable that they have their final numbers. And the fund estimate is adopted at the same time as the guidelines. So the final fund estimate will be adopted at the March commission meeting. Okay, next slide. So these are the goals for today. We will recap from last workshop, the scoring rubrics discussion. We have a few very minor guidelines changes that are the result of one of the commissioners wanting just a few clarifications in the guidelines, but we want to make sure everyone is aware of those. They don't really change anything, but we just want to make sure everyone sees the new language. But the bulk of the time today we want to spend on discussing the phase 2 of the Quick Build Project pilot program. this was the one area of the guidelines that still needed work. And so we met with our small group and have a draft of language for the phase 2 of the Quick Build project pilot program. So that's really the main area that we want to spend most of our time on today. And then we will discuss action items. Okay. Here is all of the workshops that we've done and are doing. We still have a few branch workshops that we're doing. Those are workshops that are region specific. Here they are, where we just they're more educational for that region. That if an area just wants more in-depth information on the program. Okay, next. This is our schedule. You'll see that we presented the guidelines, the draft guidelines, and the draft fund estimate at the commission meeting in January. And then the guidelines, we will have a guidelines hearing and adoption of the guidelines at the March 16th and 17th commission meeting. It's most likely that it will be on this item will be heard on March 16th. We will also adopt the fund estimate, like I had discussed. So what this means, what a hearing is that the hearing is really the final time where we can hear public comment. So through these workshops, we hope that we hear all the concerns from the stakeholders and we address them through the workshops. And then we get to a final guidelines. However, when the workshops are done, there is still an opportunity if someone has any concerns or any issues that they didn't think were addressed, you can send letters or speak at the commission meeting. And so, but then once the guidelines are adopted final, then they are final. And then shortly after the guidelines are adopted, then the call for projects will be released. And that's when officially, people can start working on their applications. So hopefully people do stuff before then, but that's when the official call for projects goes out. And then we will also post the scoring rubrics. We should be able to post those sooner than March 29th because we've covered things in our workshops that would change the scoring rubrics, and I think we can get those finalized much earlier than that March 29th. The project application deadline is June 15th, and that's electronic submittals. Okay, next slide. And then the staff recommendations for the statewide small urban and rural and the quick build pilot program, those components of the program, those staff recommendations will be released on October 21st. And remember, those are just staff recommendations. It's nothing final until the commission adopts it, and which will be at the December commission meeting. And then we move into the MPO project selection part of the program, and then the recommendations for the MPO, the staff recommendations for the MPO component will be posted on May 12th, and then the commission will adopt the MPO selected projects at the June 2023 commission meeting. And that's when, at that time, that's when we consider project selection for the 2023 ATP closed. Next. Okay, and scoring rubric recap. Next. Beverly's going to come on here. Okay, and I will jump back in as needed.
Great. Thanks, Lori. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to do a quick recap of our discussion at the last workshop from a couple weeks ago on the scoring rubrics. It's going to be pretty high level. And then at the end, we'll have a chance for any final comments. So in the scoring rubrics in the disadvantaged communities section, in alignment with the changes that we made to the application, we just clarified that projects on tribal lands and projects submitted by tribal governments will receive full disadvantaged community severity points. Next slide, please. So in the need question, which is question 2 in the infrastructure applications, in alignment with the changes that we made to the applications, we added some language about applicants describing community characteristics and context. So that's really just giving applicants the opportunity to kind of describe their community a little bit and tell the evaluators more about it, whether it's like the history of the community or socioeconomic characteristics, things like that. We added language about describing the need for users of all ages and varying abilities. So this is again something we added to the application, and we're kind of bringing it over to the scoring rubrics too. Just giving applicants the chance to talk about different maybe vulnerable groups like older adults and people with disabilities as well. And then yeah, so just really an opportunity for applicants to talk more about the benefits for different types of users. We also added language about describing the needs of disadvantaged communities. If the project is benefiting a disadvantaged community, this is something that applicants should be, if the project benefits a disadvantaged community, they should be addressing the needs of those users throughout the application. Then in alignment with our, we've been, for the enforcement language for non-infrastructure, we've been kind of reorganizing those activities under education and encouragement. So in alignment with that, we also removed enforcement language from the scoring rubrics. And then we also, in alignment with the changes that we made to the application, just added more prompts about making sure that the applicants are addressing any non-infrastructure elements if they have a combination project. Next slide, please. So for a safety question, the changes are really similar to what we did with the need question. Again, added language about describing the safety need for users of all ages and varying abilities, and removing that enforcement language, and then adding non-infrastructure prompts. Next slide, please. So for the public participation question, this is where we made a few more, I wouldn't say significant changes, but more changes to really help address the COVID issue. So we added some examples of what community engagement could look like during COVID-19, things like that weren't included last cycle, like virtual meetings or using like outdoor spaces for meetings to make sure people can socially distance, and examples of what the evidence of those meetings might look like. Maybe a virtual chat log could be included as documentation. And we also added a note for evaluators to really make sure, well, I'm sure everyone's been living it with COVID for the last 2 years, but to make sure that they consider all of those, the challenges that communities faced during COVID, and, communities or applicants should be talking about those in their response. But also ensuring that, even given COVID, that the community engagement for projects should still be sufficient for the complexity and magnitude of the project. So also in alignment with some guidelines changes we made, we added instructions for the new question on projects and planning documents. So if you recall, in the large infrastructure application, we are now asking if the project is included in an approved active transportation plan or similar plan. So we gave guidance to evaluators on that. And just to highlight, in our instructions, we do say that a project included in a plan that hasn't been approved yet, but will be approved in a reasonable time frame, can receive points on this question. And we kind of leave it up, the definition of reasonable time frame open, just to make sure there's flexibility for applicants. And then also, again, we added some non-infrastructure prompts as well, just to make sure, again, that applicants are talking about any non-infrastructure elements throughout the application. Next slide, please. So in the context sensitivity and innovation question, which is in the medium and large applications, we added some more prompts and language on low stress networks. So again, this is something we're emphasizing a little bit more this cycle. So applicants should be talking about their projects in the context of a low stress network, whether it's adding to a low stress network or creating a low stress network, or even if it's, you know, the first project that the community has ever built in their community, like how it fits in with their overall vision for a low stress network within the community. And then we also added some non-infrastructure prompts, including some prompts on sustainability and evaluation for any non-infrastructure elements in alignment with the changes we made to the application. Next slide, please. So on the transformative projects question, we added prompts related to local ordinances. So this is again something we added to the application. So the application had already asked about local policies that support active transportation. So we added the language local policies and or local ordinances. So just a reminder that applicants should be addressing those policies and ordinances as they answer this question. And then we added language clarifying that applicants must address housing or explain why it is not an issue for the community. It's part of our effort to really expand on housing this cycle and strengthen that connection between active transportation and housing. And again, we added some non-infrastructure prompts. Next slide, please. So in the scope and plan layout consistency question, this is the question where evaluators are looking at the scope and the narrative that's provided in the application and making sure that's consistent with any plan layouts that they provide in the engineer's estimate and all of those kind of technical documents that are attached. And so in this question, for combination projects, we added instructions for the evaluators on how to evaluate non-infrastructure work plans. You know, that wasn't included in the past, so it just gives them more detail on how they should be looking at those work plans. Next slide, please. And then finally, in the non-infrastructure standalone application, in the evaluation and sustainability question, we added some more examples of ways that non-infrastructure projects can be sustained, and also really emphasize that some of the things that we're looking for are student and parent leadership in sustaining the program. So that's a high-level overview of the changes that we made to the scoring rubrics, and we're happy to take any final questions or comments. And so I'll hand it over to Justin.
Thank you, Beverly. I'll give it a few moments. We did receive one written question earlier asking when the final version of the PDF application will be available.
So that's a good question. I don't think it'll be posted until the call for projects goes out, which will be March 16th, after the guidelines are approved. I don't know if anyone from Caltrans wants to come on and correct me if I'm wrong.
We do have an attendee with their hand raised from Caltrans. I'm not sure if it was related to this question or not, but I'll go ahead and unmute Alyssa Begley.
Hi there. This is Elisa Begley with Caltrans. It's not related to that item that came up. I did have a comment on leveraging. I'll wait to see if you want to answer that question or take a leveraging comment.
We can take your comment. I believe the applications won't be available until the call for projects goes out. Yeah, so yeah, we can move on to your question. That's fine, or your comment.
Thank you, appreciate it. Just a comment in listening to prior workshops and discussion about leverage in the scoring rubric. Caltrans suggests that for projects in disadvantaged and rural communities, that leverage be removed as a scoring criteria, just for projects again, in the disadvantaged and rural communities. And with the intent of helping projects in these areas be more competitive for ATP funding and reflect their more limited ability to source leverage funding. So wanted to put that suggestion up.
Alyssa, we had probably 3 workshops where we talked about leverage.
Yes, yes.
This is a rather involved issue to bring up at the very last workshop.
We had been listening to those workshops and just wanted to put the suggestion on the table for consideration. It is similar in a way to some federal competitive grant programs such as RAISE 2022, which allow up to the 100% federal share for projects located in rural areas, historically disadvantaged communities, or areas of persistent poverty, meaning there's no match or leverage needed. So understand that there's been multiple discussions on leverage in the workshops.
So since you brought up, we have to discuss it now. But I will tell you that, and I will say this publicly, that I will have to have a conversation with Caltrans about bringing up something like this at this point in the workshop. I can understand someone who is not real involved in the program, not understanding the process, but to have this come from Caltrans at this time is extremely problematic. So what Alyssa has brought up is not scoring on leverage in disadvantaged and rural areas. I'm not sure exactly how that would be defined, but are there any comments?
Thank you, Lori. We do have a few more attendees who've raised their hand during this time. We have Kristen Holcomb.
Okay.
Kristen, you're now muted, free to comment. Okay, we'll move on. Up next, we have Carl Anderson.
Hey, Lori, this is Carl Anderson from Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Yeah. I think since we've already talked in depth about this topic over 3 or 4 workshops, I think the decision that we've already come to about keeping the leverage points within the medium and large infrastructure project applications is sufficient, and I think we should just continue with that recommendation that was already decided with the working group. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl.
We received one written comment from Jonathan Matz. They write, I think it's an intriguing idea, but agree that it's late in the cycle to incorporate it.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Jean Severinghouse, seconds, yes to Carl. We have Kristen Holcomb again. Kristen, do you want to try again?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Agree it's late, but I do want to point to the recent Clean California grant program that I thought did a really, really nice job of addressing this exact issue.
I don't know. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I don't have the document pulled up for me right now, but I did apply. And what it did is basically said, there's like a formula program, like a sheet that you filled out. And it basically said, if you're, whatever metric you choose, if you met it, it then showed you what your match should or could be. And in that case, it worked it out so that if you were truly a disadvantaged community applying, your match was 0. But then if you had another, you didn't quite meet that metric, it had like a formula to make sure that it was an appropriate match. And then you got points assigned accordingly. So that is a Caltrans program, just to be clear. It is a new Caltrans program that has similar goals to the active transportation program.
Well, the goals of the active transportation program are to increase walking and biking.
And those are very much in line with what this project is for too. It's beautification, with the outcome being that people will choose walking and biking. It also includes funding for infrastructure, sidewalks and bike paths and stuff.
Okay. Anything else, Justin?
Not seeing any other attendees that just, oh, actually we have one more attendee that just raised their hand. We have James Day.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think the difference, we just finished up with Clean California, and I got enough time on ATP and BTA and Safe Routes to speak on this. The ATP program as it exists today, Clean California needs to understand that ATP does not require a match. And so the match calculations used in California, Clean California, are thrown out, are negated. What ATP is trying to do with leveraging, I believe, is that the leveraging is only coming in for the larger scale projects, correct?
Yes.
Right, okay. And that's the thing to emphasize here, is that leveraging is for the larger scale projects. And of course, disadvantaged communities may not be able to come up with leveraging for that. But again, there is no match requirement in ATP, and that's what Clean Cal needs to understand, is that we're not putting that on anyone right off the bat. And only for the very largest projects is leveraging really of any value at all. Okay, and that's my 2 cents worth. You can go ahead and mute me back.
Thanks, James. That was helpful.
We received one additional written comment from Michael Williams. They wrote, I agree with Carl and Jonathan that the points could stand as they have been outlined over the last several months.
Okay.
Not seeing any additional, oh, excuse me?
Go ahead, Justin.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more looking to comment on this particular topic.
Okay, so like we talked about, this was thoroughly discussed in multiple workshops. So I would suggest, if that is a issue with Caltrans, that we talk about this at a separate meeting, and feel free to bring it up at a commission meeting when we adopt the guidelines.
Okay, so we can go back to see if there's any more comments on the scoring rubrics before we move on to the next section. So I'll see if Justin has anything.
Thank you, Beverly. We did receive one written comment from Corey Wilkerson. He asks, will the scope consistency still be primarily scored by Caltrans?
So the scope consistency question is scored by the evaluators, but Caltrans reviews every single application, and we debrief with every single evaluator team. So we essentially have a conversation about any problematic applications on this question. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Beverly. Not seeing any additional public comment at this time.
Okay, we can move on to the next section. So we had a discussion with one of our commissioners on Friday, last Friday, who had a couple minor suggestions to add to the guidelines, and it's not, these changes aren't actually changing anything that we already do, but we wanted just to present these changes to the group so you would know that they were going into the guidelines. So next slide, please. So our commissioner suggested that we add into the scope change section that the implementing agency that's requesting the scope change should include a description of any impact to the disadvantaged community that benefits from the project if the application said a disadvantaged community was benefiting from the project. And so we added in that language in bold underline. And just to be very clear, this is an analysis that commission staff already does on each and every scope change. So we make sure that any change, if it's impacting a disadvantaged community, we follow up with the agency and we ask questions to make sure that that disadvantaged community is still receiving those benefits. So this isn't actually a change from how we're administering the program. We're just putting this into the guidelines. So there's only one other change, so I will go through that and then we can take any comments on this. So next slide, please. And then our commissioner also suggested that when we talk about safe routes to school projects, we be a little bit more inclusive of the entire school community. So we added that language that's in bold underline. So not just students, but parents, caregivers, teachers, and staff being the intended beneficiaries of the project. So we will be incorporating that in a couple different areas throughout the guidelines when we talk about safe routes to school projects and the scoring rubrics. And yeah, so those are the two changes that our commissioner suggested. And so we are happy to take any comments on these changes now.
Thank you, Beverly. Do you have one attendee so far with their hand raised? Up first, we have Victoria Cacciatore.
Thank you for overviewing the addition of the proposed language for the impact on disadvantaged communities. And it's really helpful to know that CTC staff already does this. I guess my concern would be that it's listed under the responsibilities for the agency requesting the scope change, which, once this is approved in the guidelines, then ends up being a new field in the scope request change form and all of that. So I guess I wonder if there are any other possible places that wouldn't list it as a responsibility of the agency or list it as something that CTC and the agency would work on together. Open to ideas. That's the only concern I would flag with it.
So in my opinion, it's something, so they can say they're in their, when they're asking for the scope change, that they can just say that there's not going to be any impact to the disadvantaged community, which would be a very simple response. in my opinion, if there is going to be an impact to the disadvantaged community, that's information that they should be providing to us up front anyway. So I don't think that it would be a burden on the agency requesting the scope change unless it is an impact to the disadvantaged community. And you know, when we assess these scope changes, sometimes it can take us a long time to figure out if there is an impact to the disadvantaged community. And so I personally think it would be very helpful for them to tell us that up front. And Lori can also chime in.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Beverly said. I think what we're looking for, and this actually happened once, and I don't know, Desiree and Trina might remember more, but that the agency was submitting a scope change, and it probably would have been okay. They were having to move the project for good reasons, and I think we would have been fine for it, but we realized that the project was, as originally submitted, was in a disadvantaged community, and it was being moved out of the disadvantaged community. So it, which then it really changed the whole makeup of the project, and probably would have changed the scoring. So I think that's really what we want to be careful of, is that a project that was submitted as providing benefit to a disadvantaged community and scored as such, is that it's still providing that benefit, just like in other aspects of the scope change. But I agree with Beverly. I can't see this adding any burden than what's already in the scope change process already.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you. Up next, we have Jonathan Matz.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on this added language on safe routes to school. I don't see anything to object to. And maybe you mentioned this, I just didn't hear. Was this language meant to address a specific ongoing problem with safe routes to school? I'm just kind of trying to get clarity on, like, if this was, what exactly prompted this additional language, which again, I think is fine. I'm just trying to figure out if there's a challenge that we're trying to solve.
Jonathan, this came from a commissioner. Commissioner wanted this language in there. It was important to this commissioner. And
Okay.
Since it seemed like it wouldn't, be, a change, but calling out specifically everybody involved, it seemed like something that everybody could get behind.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. It's just, in my experience, this is pretty much what is in at least the better scoring safe routes to school applications anyways. So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a kind of an ongoing observation or some kind of lack that prompted this. All right, thank you.
No, I don't think that he thought there was a problem. I think he was more just thinking about safe routes to school projects and like kind of wanted to make sure that when we're describing them to applicants, we're really being inclusive of all the people who could benefit from them. Anything else, Justin?
Yes, Beverly, we did receive one additional written comment from Keith Williams, who wrote, "Great suggestions on additions, changes to the guidelines. Thank you." And that concludes all comments that we've received during this time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Justin. Okay, we can move on to the next section, which is the quick build section. And I believe Lori is going to kind of do an introduction to this section before we talk about the changes.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. So yeah, I'm just going to do a quick intro because just so everyone understands what's happening with the pilot program. Lika, can you go to the next slide? So as probably most of you know, at last cycle, we started a quick build project pilot program because some stakeholders expressed interest in the program funding quick builds. And we went out and saw some, and we thought that they could be very valuable additions to the program. So we thought, yes, we should fund quick builds, but we don't exactly know how to do it yet. So we started out as a pilot. And this was last cycle. We said that up to 7 million would be available for quick build projects. And we received 22 applications. It was a simple application that we asked for. And the request was for 15.2 million in ATP requests. We thought 8 of the 22 fit what we were looking for, and but it was only 4.4 million, so we didn't end up going up to the 7 million. So through the initial pilot program, we determined that there was interest in funding quick builds. And just so you know, the applications we got were for various parts of the state, not just in very urban areas. There were some more small urban and rural areas that submitted too. But the applications that we got, a lot of them were not quite what we were looking for. They were closer to small infrastructure projects rather than quick build. And so we realized that that work needed to be done on the guidelines, on making sure that everyone understands what we were looking for in quick builds. And we also got some requests about the application evaluation, that we score out of, do a point scoring system. And we never really totally clarified on reporting for quick builds. So we decided that for this cycle that we would like to continue funding some quick builds. However, we weren't quite ready yet for the quick builds to just be folded into the regular program. So we thought it's best to do what we're calling a phase 2 of the pilot program. So we put together a small advisory committee, technical advisory committee, to help us work through these issues. And we met once, had a very good meeting, and we very much appreciate the people that were on this little committee with us to help us work through some of these issues. A lot of them were more delivery issues that we needed Caltrans help on, and so they were very helpful in that. And so we're going to continue with the phase 2 pilot, and we're going to keep refining quick builds before we figure out how to fold them into the regular program, if it seems like we can do that. So that's the background on it. And so that's what we wanted to talk about mostly today, because that is the one area of the guidelines that even when we presented the draft guidelines at the January commission meeting, we hadn't really worked on the language there. So we're going to present to you what we worked on with our small group, but please tell us what you think. But we really need to nail this down today, so because this is part of the guidelines that will be adopted at the March meeting. I think that's what I was going to cover, right, Beverly?
Yep, I can
Okay.
take over again.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so first, we wanted to go over some of the delivery issues that we wanted to address this cycle. So next slide, please. Okay, so Lori kind of went over some of these issues, but so during the pilot program last cycle, a lot of the projects we saw had more traditional project schedules that looked like regular ATP project schedules and didn't really look like they were that quick. And the goal of the program was to quickly address issues. So that's one of the issues that we wanted to address. And One of the things that we saw that kind of contributed to this was that some of the projects hadn't yet received environmental clearance or categorical exemption at the time of application, which led to a longer schedule. So some of our recommendations are requiring projects to have environmental clearance or categorical exemption at the time of application, and then only allowing applicants to apply for construction funding, and then they can include the cost of design in construction. So next slide, please. So this is the language that we're recommending that we add to the guidelines in bold underline. So I'll just read it for everyone. ATP funding is available for the construction phase only. If the project is expected to be delivered using the design build method, the applicant may include the cost of design in the construction phase. Applicants must specify the delivery method that they wish to use in the application. And then the project must have environmental clearance or categorical exemption at the time of application. A project in a plan that has cleared CEQA qualifies. So we can open this section up for any questions or comments. So I'll hand it over to Justin to see if there are any.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have an attendee with their hand raised at this time. Up first, we have Corey Wilkerson.
Is there going to be any points associated if an applicant is requesting to do a design build method versus a construction only? And then also, if the local agency if it's state only funds, wouldn't the local agency be responsible for the environmental clearance as the lead agency rather than Caltrans anyways?
So there won't be any points associated with the delivery method that an applicant, like if they use construction only or if they use design build. It's not part of the evaluation framework that we develop. So for the environmental clearance question, I don't know if Desiree or Trina wants to respond to that, or Lori, but I think I know the answer, but I don't want to misspeak.
What was the question again on the environmental clearance, Corey?
If a project is state funded, there's no federal funds involved, the local agency would be the lead agency for the environmental anyway, so they would just be filing some sort of a categorical exemption for CEQA purposes, but there's no NEPA process involved. Is it necessary to have that exemption completed and filed with the county? If there's no funding associated with it, it might not be appropriate to file a categorical exemption with the local county clerk. But it's something that should be relatively quick to do after the project has been funded.
I think that's too. I don't know the answer, but I think Trina is going to come on and help us here.
Trina.
Hi, Corey. Yes, I think you should have the CEQA because, if you have the CE already, you can get the project going on very smoothly, right? Sometimes when they hit another milestone, they found, it's not CEQA anymore. Oh, it's not CE categorical exemption anymore. So that's gonna open another bag of worms. That's why I think you get the CEQA cleared and then goes to the quick builds of design build. Yeah, that will be the ideal case.
Okay.
Thank you, Trina.
Thanks, Trina.
Up next, we have Maria Carrillo. Maria, you are now muted and free to comment. Okay, we'll move on. We have a few written comments that were received during this time. The first asks, what does the quick build application process look like? Is there a difference between phase 1 and phase 2 for funding?
So the quick build application will be very similar to the application that we used in the first phase of the pilot program. So it's going to be a separate application. It's not kind of the PDF application that you have to put together for a normal ATP project. It's much simpler and it has different narrative questions that we'll show you later on in this presentation, but it's not as complex. And so applicants will respond to those questions and then add in the attachments. And then rather than submitting through like the regular ATP, they'll be given an email address to send their application in like they did last cycle. And we will not be, again, like the regular program, we won't be requiring hard copies this cycle for the quick builds.
Thank you, Beverly. The next written question comes from Shauna Gaz. They ask, Caltrans sometimes requires studies and tech memos even in CE projects. Is it worthwhile to change language to say project must have environmental compliance documentation completed?
That's it. I don't know, Trina or Desiree, if you want to come on again. When it comes to the specific language for that, I'm kind of leaning on our Caltrans experts to tell us.
We do have Trina.
Great.
Excuse me. Yeah, we do have Trina again available to make comment. Trina, you're free to mute yourself.
Hi, thank you. You know, for the CEQA, local agency is the leading agency to get the CEQA certified. You are talking about the NEPA process that will be, you know, include the Caltrans. So for the quick builds, we use the state funds, no NEPA needed. So you do not need to go through Caltrans to get your environmental cert approved. Is that clear?
Thanks, Trina.
Thank you.
The next written question comes from Kristen Holcomb. They ask, how long does the categorical exemption process take? Can the applicant state they have applied at the time of application but have nothing heard back?
Trina.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
you're still there.
Doesn't matter, you know, because I used to work in the local agency, so I done a lot of the, you know, CEQA process. You know, sometimes it can, you know, as short as just one day, you know, a couple of weeks. That's the you know, the maximum, because your the local agency is the leading agency. They just need to record through the county or through their own city. Yeah, so that's very quick, very, very quick process. It does not need to go through the Caltrans at all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trina.
Up next, we have Corey Wilkerson.
With, as I understand, with other SB1 funded programs, the CEQA documentation does not require to be finalized at the time of application submittal, but has to be finalized before the program, before the final programming. For some local agencies, they may require that the funding is in place before they have to accept the grant before they can clear the CEQA at the same time. As with the local agencies being the lead in these for the environmental clearance, I feel like there wouldn't be any harm in providing a little bit of extra time after the application has been submitted to post their CEQA, like maybe before allocation or something along those lines, that that would give the local agencies that have different policies a little bit more flexibility to be able to meet this requirement rather than requiring it at the time of application.
Thanks, Corey. So to clarify, it's my understanding that we don't just, this is just to clarify, it's my understanding that we don't use any SB1 funds on quick builds. So they don't
I was just using that as an example.
reporting.
I apologize.
That's okay. I just wanted to clarify that. So we just don't want them to have to go through that SB1 reporting process. We have a different reporting process for quick builds.
Okay.
So I'll see if Trina wants to chime in, if she thinks that's reasonable to say like before allocation.
Yeah, Beverly, I think, I understand if, before allocation requires the CE, but just like we said, quick build is to quickly implement something. And if during the process you found, CE is not enough, you need to go to the MND or ND or even EIR to some degree. Oh my gosh, that's no longer quick. That's the reason why we want you guys have the CEQA CEQA CE certified before you apply the application.
I agree that especially in the case of an EIR, that may be a little bit of overkill, but because local agencies are the lead agency on the environmental clearance, they may have policies that require that they have accepted a grant prior to being able to do this. So that would rule those local agencies out from being able to apply.
Okay, Corey, if you can send us something where definitively says that, we'll consider it. But I don't want to put stuff. We did not get quick builds last time that were quick builds, okay? We want quick builds. And so I don't want to keep putting squishy language in here that's going to create the same issue. So I don't want to change the language on the possibility that some agency may have some policy somewhere. If you can send us that, or someone can tell us definitively that's the case, and that this provision would effectively keep them out of applying for quick builds, then we would consider it.
I just think that if they're not able to provide the CEQA clearance before allocation, that there would be no harm in that. They would essentially have to give the project back if they're not able to provide the CEQA clearance before allocation. And allocation has to be within 6 months. Nothing
is simple like that, and you know that. You know that if we put something in there, it would not be easy to ensure that we're still getting what we want. So like I said, if you can send us something that tells us for sure that there are agencies that this would harm them submitting, then we would consider it.
Okay, I'll check.
Okay.
Thanks, Lori.
Beverly, we did receive a few more comments during this time. First comes from Oscar Side. He asks, sorry, I missed the earlier slide. What projects do slide 24 apply to?
So we're going over the quick build project phase 2 pilot program. So this would apply to quick build projects. All other types of projects can still apply for every phase.
Thank you. From Kristen Holcomb, they commented that they agree with Corey. Next written comment comes from Graham Wadsworth. Their comment is, in terms of CEQA, a categorical exclusion can take a few days to prepare and file a notice of exemption. However, preparing an initial study mitigating negative declaration can take months depending on the studies required.
Okay, thank you.
And Beverly, that concludes all written comments that we've received during this time, and I don't see any additional attendants with their hand raised.
Okay, so it looks like we can move on, and it looks like Corey may send us something on that on the environmental clearance language, so that could possibly change. But this is what we have for now. We'll be in the guidelines unless we hear otherwise. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so last cycle, the quick build guidelines were silent on time extensions, and so they just defaulted back to the normal ATP timely use of funds policy. And so we did receive some of the successful projects that we programmed did ask for time extensions. And it's kind of a gap that we realized that we're in the guidelines. And again, we're really trying to make sure that these are quick build projects that are being quickly rolled out into communities. So our recommendation is to limit the length of time extensions and require that they only be requested in extraordinary circumstances. Next slide, please. So this is the new language that we are proposing to add to the guidelines. I'll read it for everyone and then kind of explain it. So the commission will only consider quick build project time extensions in extraordinary circumstances. Implementing agencies may request to extend a delivery deadline as described in section 31 of these guidelines. And section 31, just to be clear, is the timely use of funds section of the guidelines. And then approved time extensions will be limited to 3 months per delivery deadline. So for this, we're not defining what an extraordinary circumstance is. You can look back at our time extensions from commission meetings and kind of see what those kind of circumstances are. So they don't include things like staffing issues at an agency. And then we're putting a 3-month time limit on any time extension for each delivery deadline, just to make sure that these are still being implemented quickly. So we can now take any questions or comments on this new section.
Thank you, Beverly. I'll give it a moment. Not yet seeing any. Not seeing any attendee looking to make a comment at this time.
Okay, we can wait a few more seconds. Okay, we can move on to the next section. Okay, so scope changes. So we realized that quick build projects may not work well with the traditional ATP scope change process just by the nature of quick build projects, because they're really supposed to be flexible and change based on community feedback. And so we wanted to build in a little bit more flexibility for agencies when it came to scope changes. So next slide, please. So these are our we did have a scope change policy in the last round of quick builds, but it was pretty much aligned with our regular scope change policy, and so we added some language and changed it around a little bit. So basically, successful applicants are required to submit new project layouts during each reporting period to reflect the adjustments made based on community feedback. And to be clear, this is already a requirement within our reporting. It's not something new that we're adding. And then we're saying quick build projects that propose to make substantial changes that differ significantly from the anticipated project scope must follow the project amendment process outlined in section 28 of the guidelines. So significant changes include, but are not limited to, a change in project location or the removal of the project. And then implementing agencies should inform Caltrans of any potentially significant changes. So basically what we're saying here is that if you are making adjustments to the project that are a normal part of the quick build project, based on community feedback. You will not need to submit a scope change, but if you anticipate any significant changes, which could include, moving it to an entirely new intersection, for example, then you'll have to go through a scope change. So hopefully this provides a little bit more flexibility in terms of the scope change process. So we can see if there are any questions or comments on this language.
Thank you, Beverly. We'll give it a few moments. Still not seeing any at this time.
Okay. We can move on then. Okay, so those were the main delivery issues that we wanted to address. And so now we can talk about the application and the evaluation of those applications. So as I mentioned, someone asked the question earlier about the application. So last cycle, we had a very simple application for the quick builds, and we're going to do that again. And so we wanted to make a few changes to the applications and to the evaluation framework, really to address some of the issues that we saw last cycle. So next slide, please. So one of the main issues we saw last cycle was that some of the projects that were submitted to us weren't flexible or adjustable, and they really seemed more like small infrastructure projects to us. And they didn't have, a comprehensive plan for continuous community engagement, and they didn't really have a process fleshed out for testing the project with the community. So we're hoping to refine the application and the scoring criteria to emphasize this community input process and to emphasize project flexibility so that we're truly getting quick build projects and not small infrastructure projects. So next slide, please. So this is just from the introduction in the guidelines of what quick build projects are. And we're just adding in one section, these projects have moderate design flexibility to anticipate adjustments that may occur based on community feedback, really to just, again, emphasize that community engagement process. Next slide, please. So there is a list of application narrative questions, and we are proposing to add some language to the community public participation process question. So currently it asks who was engaged in the identification and development of the project, how they were engaged, which is pretty much in alignment with what we ask in our normal applications. And we also ask more about the continuous community engagement. So how will the project serve as an engagement strategy? And then how will they be engaged through the duration of the project? And then we are wanting to add a kind of a sub-question. How will users provide input into design modifications, and how will these suggestions be used to inform changes? Next slide, please. So also related to this change, we wanted to add one new question to the list of questions. So this is kind of the only new question that we're really adding besides that sub question that I just mentioned. And so that question will say, we're proposing, it says, referencing the project layout plans, describe the anticipated scope of the quick build project and potential ways in which the project can be adjusted to address community feedback. Next slide, please. So this is from the evaluation framework that the evaluators will be looking at. So we're proposing to add a little bit of language here. So in the community and engagement section, we're proposing to add to one of the sub areas for evaluation, evidence of planned continuous community engagement for the duration of the project. And then adding in the new language, including your process for testing project configurations and integrating community feedback. And then adding a new evaluation criteria that says it's project flexibility, and the thing that will be scored is design alternatives that show that the project scope is flexible and can be adjusted based on community testing and feedback. So that's the main, those are kind of what we're trying to do, just to really get applicants to talk about how the project is flexible and to talk about their continuous community engagement process. So we can stop there and see if there are any questions or comments on this section.
Thank you, Beverly. We did receive one written comment that kind of came towards the end of the last section from Jean Severinghouse. They asked, would it be wise to mention changes to intersections here?
In terms of, sorry, that was related to the last section. So in terms of like the project delivery, I don't know if they want to come off mute and ask their question, because I'm not entirely sure I understand.
It might have been under the section on scope changes. I don't know.
You're right.
Yes,
Probably.
yes, they just responded and clarified that yes, it was the scope changes.
Can we go back to that, Beverly? Because that actually might be a we might want to hear from Desiree and Trina on that, but that might be something that we want to add.
Okay. Sorry, Justin, can you read the question again?
Or if the
Sure.
person come off mute, actually that might be simpler.
Yeah.
Yes, Jean has her hand raised at this time. You're now unmuted and free to comment.
Yes, thank you. It's just that the devil is in the detail with intersections, and it might be helpful just to include that word in this page of scope change policy. And I'd love to hear what Caltrans might say about that, but it seems like it would be an important and helpful word to include here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
We do have Desiree Fox, who's raised her hand at this time. Desiree, you're now unmuted.
Hi, what was the full question again? I didn't understand.
The question was, would it be wise to mention changes to intersections here, referring to scope changes?
That changes to intersections be what?
So changes, significant changes include but are not limited to a change in project location or intersection or the removal of the project. So just be specific.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay, so I guess we're proposing to add changes to intersections as one of the examples. I'm wondering, I don't know, Desiree, if you're still there, like, do you think like any quick builds, like if they're doing changes at intersections, would any of this, like, would they all be significant or just some of them?
I mean, I was thinking that like the significance would be more so if they were to completely change the intersection that they would want to do those changes at. That might rise to the level of a scope change, but that if it's just, you know, they're changing the configuration in the actual intersection, and it's an intersection that they've already proposed to do those changes at, that those could just be, you know, something that they report on versus actually needing a scope change. Does that make sense? Am I answering the question?
And that's what I was thinking too. And kind of the reason it says include but are not limited to like, and it provides a couple of examples, is that I could see there being other significant changes that we don't necessarily think of. So maybe they are changing the configuration of the intersection in a really major way. And so we leave it kind of open, and I would just say that the agency really should be talking to Caltrans and like keeping them informed if they do anticipate something, like if there's a question about whether something is major or like significant, then they should ask that question. At least that's how I'm thinking about it. But I don't know, Lori, if you have any input.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's Jean, I think it's you bring up a good point, but I think what we're saying is that we don't want to end up boxing ourselves or the agency or Caltrans in any way. So I think it's a good point, but I think it would be better overall if we left it out.
Okay, thanks, Lori, and thank you, Desiree. Okay, can we go back to that last section, please? Perfect. Thank you so much.
Beverly, we do have one more attendee with their hand raised at this time. We have Corey Wilkerson. Thank you.
Can you go back to the slide with the introduction?
The introduction to the quick build section?
Yeah. You guys had made some changes to that language, and it was on one of the slides. But I wanted to mention something it's.
Sure. I think it's slide 31, Alika.
Thanks, Beverly. I think I was going in the wrong direction there.
This
there
one, yeah.
Okay. I think that there needs to be considerable more changes to the description of what constitutes a quick build versus a small infrastructure project. I think that there's a lot of confusion with local agencies out there, and it probably is resulting in some pretty piss poor applications that you guys are receiving with folks that do not understand that, you know, things like curb ramps should not be included in a quick build, and you know, some of these kind of harder construction items. And I think that providing a list of the types of items that would be included in a quick build as an example versus things that would be incredibly helpful to local agencies that are trying to determine whether or not this is a good fit for them.
Corey, that's a good suggestion. Alika, could you actually jump to slide 38, please? Okay, so this is a new section that we were going to add to provide some examples of different elements that they could include. So I like your suggestion of including like another part that says like, you know, these are more like small infrastructure elements. So I think maybe we could add that here.
Okay. Yeah, you know, even if it's like a do this, not that, like, you know, I think that there's a lot of confusion out there about what constitutes a quick build, and it just, I think local agencies are so confused that they're just simply not applying because they don't get it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion, Corey. Thank you. We can work on adding some of those examples in here.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll work with Caltrans. And if anyone has any suggestions as well, feel free to chime in or send us suggestions. Okay. Any other questions on that last section or comments?
Beverly received 2 additional comments that included links. First was this QB guidance was included last year with a link to that, and then someone provided a link on quick builds. Great descriptions of quick build projects can be found, and they provided a link as well.
Great, that's perfect. So we'll still have a section that has links to quick build guidance documents, and we're adding a couple new things in there. We're adding a new one, a couple new ones, and then also a link to the presentation on quick builds at the ATP symposium. But yeah, if you know of any good guidance documents and you want to share those with us, please do so, because I think the more resources that we can include, the better for our applicants. So thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Beyond that, we have not received any additional comment.
Okay, great. Thanks, Justin. Okay, Alika, I think the next slide now is slide 35. Sorry to be jumping around so much. Perfect. Okay, so the next thing we wanted to address were the cost estimates and the layouts that are required as part of the application. So in the last round of quick builds, we only required one project layout for it to be presented as part of the application, which again didn't really show whether that project was flexible or adjustable. Oh, hey, Lori, what's up?
I just wanted to, sorry, I didn't, my
That's okay.
brain probably wasn't working fast enough today, but I just wanted to say, to respond to Corey, and that if agencies are confused on if it's a quick build, as everyone should know, we are having 100,000 site visits. I'm exaggerating, but we have done a lot of site visits. So we are in close contact with the agencies this cycle. So if anybody has a question, and if they think that their project is a quick build or small infrastructure, they should just ask us. You know, I think with quick builds, they're not, from what I remember when we were starting this last cycle, that there's not like one definition, and I'm really hesitant to put, like real specifics in, because then when we're still seeing what's out there. So I just want to be careful on that. And I would hope that agencies realize that they should just ask us or ask Caltrans, and we'll talk with Caltrans, however they're most comfortable. Sorry.
No, thanks, Lori. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, people are always welcome to reach out to us to ask questions like that. Okay, so yeah, we only required one layout, and then in terms of cost estimates, they're pretty similar to how we run our normal cost estimates for the regular ATP. So we wanted to give applicants a little bit more flexibility, knowing that projects should be flexible and adjustable. So next slide, please. In terms of layouts, we added, so it currently said project map and plan showing existing conditions in the initial project layout. And then we're adding applicants must provide at least one additional design alternative layout to show that the project is flexible and can be adjusted based on community feedback. And then for cost estimates, the cost estimate should include items in the anticipated project scope, and the new language is and potential design alternatives. Items should not be double counted if included in more than one design alternative. And just to be clear, this is a reimbursement-based program, so they can be included in the cost estimate, but if they aren't actually used because they don't use that alternative, then obviously they wouldn't get funds for that item. So we can open this section up for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have one attendee with her hand raised at this time. We have Corey Wilkerson.
Why would we ask for an additional design alternative if the design alternatives are intended to be based on community feedback and things that you find out after you implement a project? Isn't the whole idea behind this that those design alternatives will be developed as part of the feedback and in response to the feedback? And like, I don't understand why we would ask for more from the applicants at the time of application when, how do they know what's going to happen?
Sure. So I think we're mainly trying to get them to show us that it can be flexible. It's not that they'll be expected to like use that the additional layout that they provide. It's really just to show us that they can adjust it if necessary. Again, like trying to differentiate between something that's small infrastructure and something that is quick builds. And also providing, if they're thinking through different ways that they could adjust it, hopefully they, could include those potential things that they're thinking about in their cost estimate, so they can ask for an accurate amount of funds.
I mean, I would assume that that's something that could be described in kind of the application itself, rather than it takes a lot more work to produce these plans and the layout plans. Couldn't we achieve the same goal by just asking them to describe how, what alternative materials they might consider, what types of changes they might consider, moving delineators, adding planters, things like that, but not necessarily require it in layout form? It just takes a lot of work to produce those layouts.
Sure, and we did, I think a couple slides ago, we showed that we're adding a question on that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I think we maybe could change this to encouraging them to include an additional layout to really help the evaluators visualize like how the project can be adjusted. And Lori, I'll see if you want to jump in with your opinion.
It just seems like a lot of extra work that might not necessarily be valuable if the initial design works out well, or if they don't, something else comes up that they didn't, was unforeseen.
So just so you know, we didn't make up this stuff just out of our own heads. We worked with our small group on this. So Beverly, I don't remember, do you remember what the background was on this?
And can you provide a list of who was involved in that small group? I don't know anybody.
I'll tell you right now if you want.
Yeah.
It's not a secret. Okay, hold on. I have to go off camera for a minute.
Sure. So when we talked to the group before Lori came back on camera, like one of their suggestions was that, like, especially when they're thinking, it mainly is to get them to think about different design alternatives and to make sure they're including that in their cost estimate, and to also help the evaluators show that it's flexible and adjustable. I think those were like the main reasons that we wanted to include that. I'm open to just saying that we encourage them to include an additional design.
Yeah, it seems like, I don't know. seems kind of counterintuitive to, at least to me, to how these projects get delivered and how they're evaluated and the whole concept behind them. If we knew everything ahead of time, we would be doing, you know, harder improvements.
Beverly,
Yeah.
I want to make sure with Caltrans on this that it wasn't something, a engineering issue that we were addressing here before we agree to anything.
Sure.
So I guess what I'm saying is if Desiree or Trina can come off and provide some feedback too, that'd be great.
Yes, we do have Trina that is available to make comment at this time.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, typically, when I work in the local agency, I do need to have several alternatives or different things to talk to the community. For example, I have an intersection, striping. I can go, go to, more like 4 legs and also go through the diagonal. So at that time, the community that does not know what they want. So we kind of put one in a week, the other one in another week, so they can taste. That's the reason we have the quick build, so to include the community feedback. So with that one, actually, we do have the layouts for different, scenario. That's why I think if we can include the layouts for the alternatives, first, the local agency need to talk to their community. They need to have those layouts. The second, with the layouts, is more visual. So that's my comments.
So I know that in our reporting process, we require any layout changes that are made, we require them to provide a new layout to us to show that the layout changes were made. So I think what Corey is saying is that, well, I know what Corey is saying is that the community doesn't necessarily know how the project will change because we'll be going through a community engagement process once the initial layout is built. So the community can provide feedback and they'll change it based on that feedback. So we already knew that. And at least from my perspective, one of the reasons we added in at least one additional layout is, to make sure that the community is really thinking about this project as a quick build and not as a small infrastructure project. So they're really thinking about, how the project, thinking about, that they'll be adjusting the project. The project needs to be adjustable. So, Lori, I don't know if you want to chime in here too.
So I don't know if anybody else has some comments. I think I'd like to hear if there's any other voices out there on this issue.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Lori. We do have other attendees looking to make comment at this time. Up next, we have Kristen Holcomb.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I wanted to say that I agree completely with Corey. I think that presumably, if this is truly a quick build, there's already been fairly extensive community involvement in the actual concept, and that any changes that would be made would happen during the process of implementing the quick build project. So agree that don't include an additional concept plan, but then talk to steps that will be taken to make changes if we get comments from the community that they want it changed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Carl Anderson.
All right, Carl Anderson with MTC. Can you hear me? It said I was muted still.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So on this question, I think it's best if we just leave it as a part of the narrative piece of the application and prompting the applicant to talk about how their project can adapt and what type of elements they can change. I think this bit goes against the very nature of a quick build project of, you know, keeping costs down as low as possible and being able to implement as quickly as possible. So I'm not excited to see this as a requirement to include additional layout plans. But I understand the intent, and I think it's a good idea. And even if it did come from Caltrans here, I think that what is cool and exciting about the Quick Build pilot program is that it's a pilot program about breaking the mold about kind of our traditional delivery methods and our traditional projects. And so I'd really hate to see something as prescriptive as, you know, traditional Caltrans practices come in and burden the applicant here. And then just kind of one overall comment about a lot of the changes that you've presented today. I think they're all great because, I mean, this is a pilot program. We're exploring to figure out what works before this becomes permanent. And so I just want to keep as much flexibility as possible for all the applicants to make sure that, you know, we're getting cool quick build projects and we're actually getting projects that will have a quick and impactful effect on the communities that they're serving. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl.
Beverly, we did receive an additional written comment from Sarah Aiken, who commented that they agree with Corey. And beyond that, we don't have any other public comment at this time.
Thanks, Justin.
So let me just be sure, Beverly, is it the first underline, is it the including one additional design alter? That's the problem. Okay, yes. So if we put encourage, is that I think that would that be acceptable, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Sorry, this is Carl again, MTC. I think I'm still unmuted, but I think that sounds reasonable. So if an applicant does want to go through that extra effort to provide the additional design, then sure, but just don't make it a requirement.
Okay. Okay, I think we would be okay with encourage. So if anyone else has feedback on that.
Yes, Larry, we do have someone looking to comment on that item. Kristen Holcomb.
Thanks. Yeah, I have to say, even saying encourage is going to put an undue burden on agencies, because if it's encouraged, it will likely score better, as opposed to those who are unable to do that or choose not to do it because they feel very comfortable with their existing concept.
Kristen, we have specifics way that we're going to score it. And is this part of the scoring, Beverly?
So we do score on project flexibility. So what we're scoring on is, the way it's written now, is design alternatives that show the project scope is flexible and can be adjusted based on community testing and feedback. And so that is based on not just this, so it's based on this, but it's also mainly based on the narrative question that we're adding that we went over a few slides ago.
Okay, yeah. So this, Kristen, this is one of those, I think we need to have a compromise position on this, and that would be saying encourage. We are not demanding it. We're going to encourage it, and we can address it in the way that that it's being scored.
Okay, that sounds great. If you can let the scorers know that it's not a requirement and that they should score accordingly. That would be my request.
Yeah, we can include that in our discussion with the scorers. Anything else, Justin?
Thank you, Beverly. We do have one more attendee with their hand raised at this time. We have Corey Wilkerson.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the compromise. I'm fine with encouraging, as long as it doesn't necessarily affect the evaluation, and that if an applicant chooses to be more descriptive in that question that we're adding to ensure, to show that how they may be flexible in the design and give some, some potential examples, recognizing that there are unforeseen changes that may occur. And then again, to reiterate what Carl mentioned earlier, I really am very happy with a lot of the changes that you guys are proposing with this, which is why you didn't hear me on a lot of those other ones, is that I like it. I like a lot of the changes that you guys are making, and that and recognizing that this program needs to be flexible, but then it also really does need to be delivered quickly, and that applicants should be ready to go, ready to build this, and ready to address these things quickly. And that if they're not able to do that, then really it does change that maybe that it is more of a small infrastructure project rather than a quick build. So thank you guys, I really appreciate it, and I'm sorry, Lori, for making things more difficult, but this is the first time I've seen these changes, so this has been the first opportunity to provide comments.
Thanks, Corey. Anything else, Justin?
Not seeing anybody else looking to make public comment at this time, Beverly. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, we can move on to the next topic. So we kind of already went through this. We did include links to some resources last cycle, which we will continue to include, and hopefully include some new resources as well. But we didn't include like examples in this section. And so next slide, please. So we were going to propose to add some examples of what quick build elements could look like. And Corey has a suggestion of adding some examples of what they wouldn't look like. And I agree with Lori that we shouldn't be too like really define that too much, because we know that quick builds could look very different. But I think we could provide more distinction between like an infrastructure and a quick build project here. So we can work on adding some language in here to really bring out those examples. But I just wanted to see if anyone had any additional comments or suggestions on the examples.
Thank you, Beverly. We'll give it a few moments. Beverly, we have received one written comment so far from Corey Wilkerson. They wrote, items not to include, sidewalk construction, curb ramps, etc.
Thanks, Corey.
And that's all we've received at this time.
Okay. We can move on to the next section. So another topic that we wanted to address is project reporting. Next slide, please. So there is a reporting process that our successful quick build implementing agencies currently go through. It's not through CalSmart, like the normal reporting process and the normal SB1 process that we have for reporting. It's kind of a separate template, and it captures a lot of different things. It's a quarterly report, but we didn't in that initial reporting kind of show after the quick build is done and after the project has gone through like the testing process, how agencies are capturing any lessons learned and other project outcomes, which is something we really want to see with these quick builds. as we learn more about them and kind of encourage more agencies to try them out. So we are going to be recommending that we include a completion report as part of this process. So next slide, please. So we made a few changes to the reporting section of the guidelines. Last cycle, we said that more frequent reports and updates must be submitted. What we found is that we're really just sticking to that quarterly report rather than more frequent updates. So we're saying that quarterly reports are required and more frequent reports and updates may be required if requested rather than they must be submitted. And then just clarifying that we already required new layout plans and that they should be attached to each quarterly report if any layout changes have happened. And then the final sentence here, implementing agencies will be required to submit a completion report that includes photographs of project layouts and a narrative on project outcomes and lessons learned. And so by photographs of project layouts, we're not, unlike the regular program where for the completion reports we're requiring a certain image quality, we didn't want to require that here. We really just want, with the completion report, to see kind of the evolution of the project as it changed based on community feedback. So we can open this one up for any questions or comments.
Given it a few moments. We have received a written comment from Marianne Hernandez. They wrote, include signed photo waivers if people's faces are depicted.
Thank you, Marianne. So we included that in another section of the guideline. So yeah, that's consistent with what we're adding here. So we can either add that here or we can refer back to that other section of the guidelines. So thank you for bringing that up.
Give it a few more moments, not seeing any others at this time. Still seeing none, Beverly. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, we can move on to the next section. Okay, so for the scoring, so last cycle we scored on several different criteria, which I'll pull up on the screen in a few moments, or Alika will pull it up in a few moments, I should say. So we scored on a different kind of, using a different method than we do with the regular program. And one of the requests that we got from some of the MPOs is that we score out of 100 this cycle rather than our high, medium, low scoring system. So we tried to create a framework that is out of 100, so it's easier for those MPOs to potentially include some of these projects in their components. So we'll show you the scoring criteria, and there is the two new things that I showed earlier in the presentation are on here in bold underline. So next slide, please, Alika. So for the need and safety, so I'll kind of go through each section and then we can talk about it. And so for need and safety, they're scored on evidence that the project will benefit non-motorized users. And this should actually be bold underlined because it's new language. Adding in including students, older adults, and disadvantaged communities. And that's just in alignment with our the goals of the program. Evidence that the project will quickly address an urgent safety need. Again, that's just pulled over from last cycle. That's something that we already scored on. And community engagement and interagency support. evidence of community engagement in the identification and initial planning of the project, and then evidence of continuous community engagement for the duration of the project, including a process for testing the project and integrating community feedback, and then evidence of support from critical partners. And the guidelines, I shortened it here, but the guidelines actually, oh, thanks, Alika. The guidelines actually show, like kind of tell you what those critical partners could be. So it could be emergency services or local community-based organizations, just kind of those normal partners that we look for when we're scoring community engagement for ATP projects. And then we added the project flexibility question, where they can kind of, as we were discussing a few minutes ago, really discuss the project scope and how it was, how it might be tested and adjusted based on community feedback. A performance metrics question, which again is pulled over from last cycle, so how its progress and performance will be measured. The potential for a permanent project, so how the project will provide a foundation for a potential permanent project. A funding strategy, so evidence of a long-term funding strategy for a permanent project, and then a maintenance strategy, so how will they make sure the project is maintained. And then project readiness, so it can be implemented quickly to address an immediate need. So the point totals are over in like the furthest right-hand column, and we can leave this up and take any questions or comments on this criteria.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have one attendee with their hand raised at this time. We have Kristen Holcomb.
Hi, Kristen Holcomb. I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So you'll give points for, or score points for, if the project has potential to become an infrastructure, like a permanent infrastructure project. And if that's the case, I have a problem with that, because oftentimes, sorry, I shouldn't say oftentimes, it could be that the quick build is the solution.
So it's our assumption that if someone is applying for a quick build, these really are interim projects, and they're addressing a safety need that the community has identified, but they want to have a chance to test out some potential solutions. So that's kind of what our expectation is. And we understand that maybe that testing process, they'll find out that this isn't the solution that they wanted, or they need to do something else, and that the project didn't have the results they expected it to. But it's kind of our assumption that eventually, if the project is successful, that the community would want to make those changes permanent and not just have temporary materials. And Lori, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Well, if I could, before Lori chimes in or as she chimes in, that I don't think that's for all projects. So sometimes something like a painted curb extension or bulb out might be the preferred treatment, and there might be maintenance costs, being that paint can fade and such over time, but that the maintenance costs would be lower than to maintain an infrastructure project. Yeah, I don't think that it's appropriate to assign points to projects based on their ability to become built.
So I think that they could include in their narrative that, you know, if that a painted curb extension, if that works out for the community, then that would remain permanent, and that would be the permanent solution. I think that they could include that in their narrative.
Yeah.
Okay, so as long as we're addressing that.
We had this last cycle. And yes, sometimes the solution is that's what it is, that the applicants need to address what's going to happen after the quick build. Okay, that's incredibly important. And if the ultimate finding is that it didn't work, or that whatever they put down for the quick build is sufficient, then that's what how they would answer the question. I mean, we want some kind of discussion on what this quick build is supposed to be working towards.
Okay, and in all fairness, that we've learned so much about quick build in the last 2 years, which I think is the reason why we know so much now, is because Caltrans has given and CTC has given attention to this, which I think is spectacular. I would just then ask the word infrastructure be taken out, or if there's flexibility in there on how that it may not be, you know, another capital project. It could be continuing with the design or the quick build as implemented.
I don't understand what is it that you're trying to achieve here? What is it that you want?
Okay, so if I could give an example, so if we were to do a quick build mid-block crossing using quick build materials, but you know, eventually the community is thinking, oh, this should become you know, gutter, curbs, sidewalks, islands, all those things, but that in the context of the community, actually using those temporary-ish, temporary, I don't know is the right word because these can last years, would be fine. And then on top of that, maybe the city thinking, applying for additional funds or identifying capital improvement funds for this particular project doesn't make sense anymore because the treatment we've gone with is working. I'm just making sure that we're not saying these projects must become capital projects, that it's okay if they stay and they won't be penalized if they're.
Kristen, the quick builds are, our intent is that it would either result in the community not liking the quick build and that they don't do anything, or that it leads to something more permanent. Because the problem that we had last cycle is we got projects submitted that were small infrastructure. And there was reasons why they did that, which we totally know. And we do not want that. The idea of a quick build is that it's trying something out. It's not because they want to do something really cheap. If that's all they need to do, they should just be able to use their local funds to do that. I don't want to discount what you're saying, but I think what you're saying is not in the spirit of what our quick builds are trying to achieve.
Okay, that's totally fair. I would love to hear from other folks if they have thoughts on this.
Thank you. We also have Corey Wilkerson with her hand raised at this time. Corey?
I don't completely disagree with Kristen, but I think I understand where she's coming from, and that sometimes you discover that the semi-permanent improvements become the permanent improvement in some cases, and that we don't want to necessarily limit that. But you know, I understand what Lori's saying also, that the idea behind, at least the CTC's thoughts behind this program is that they, you know, these projects would lead to something, and may lead to a small infrastructure project or a medium infrastructure project at a later date, and depending on the results, or like you said, it could be completely removed. And it was, you know, it's a good thing they tried it with temporary materials and didn't start adding construction. I actually wanted to comment on the last point there, the project readiness. Is it possible to increase the points associated with project readiness? I think that it is really important that these projects are ready to go and that they can be implemented relatively quickly, because they are intended to address you know, urgent safety needs. And I was thinking that, you know, maybe some points could be removed from some of the other questions and increase the project readiness points. So just want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so let's come back to that, because we totally can increase those points but we want to hear from other people. But just to wrap up Kristen's suggestion here is that, remember, this is an application. So I mean, I would hate for an applicant to say, we want to put down something temporary and that's really cheap, and we hope that's all we have to do.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think that anybody.
I know.
Wants
so
to
it seems like a kind of a not. I don't know how to say this without saying that would not be a smart way to answer the question.
Right. I think that where it says potential permanent infrastructure project, that maybe that specific language could be adjusted to say, I mean, you could just simply remove the infrastructure portion of it, and provide the foundation for a potential permanent project.
What's the difference? I'm confused. What is not an infrastructure?
See for instance,
this is totally, I'm not understanding this at all. Beverly, are you understanding this better than me?
So I do understand, but I also just want to clarify that we consider quick build projects and infrastructure projects. Like we don't, like there's like our normal infrastructure projects, and then we have our quick build projects, which are also classified as infrastructure. So it's not like demonstration projects. We classify as non-infrastructure, and those are like applied for through the non-infrastructure, like as non-infrastructure projects.
So just as an example, some of the nicest protected bike lanes that I've seen are in Vancouver, and they use those self-watering planters and asphalt curbs to create those protected bike lanes, and they're very nice, and they are it's the type of thing that a local city might say, this is better than doing a raised median with a planter bed in the middle, and that some of the feedback from the community might be that we like these planters better than a raised median.
That's an infrastructure project.
If I could chime in,
we would consider that an infrastructure project. So I don't want to pick apart words when it's not relevant. Okay, Kristen?
Yeah, sorry. I would appreciate it if you could somewhere articulate what CT's understanding is the difference between demonstration projects and quick build. To your point, yes, they're infrastructure projects, but when we hear infrastructure as practitioners, and please again, people chime in, we think of the hardscape, whereas this kind of intermediary is this quick build, which are not just done because they're cheap. I don't ever want that to be communicated to a community because we're doing this because it's cheaper. We're doing it because we can do it faster, and we can maybe even, to Corey's point, make it even more beautiful and more reflective of the community than a hardscape or a capital project. So I think that's, if there could just be, I hear what you're saying, Lori, that it's infrastructure, but again, with practitioners, and as this is a really new concept to some communities, that there's just some clarification on what you mean by quick build versus demonstration projects and infrastructure.
Well, we already do that, don't we, Beverly? We make it pretty clear on the difference between a demonstration and a quick build.
Okay, that's awesome. I think it's that this is showing up in a rubric that's where I get pause, because I wouldn't want a community to be unfairly scored because they didn't have, or that they didn't know for sure if this was going to lead to more permanent improvements. But I'm going to stop talking. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. So Beverly, I think Corey has brought up a point about the scoring, which I think is something up for discussion.
Yeah, so I wanted to see, so we can open it up if anyone wants to talk about the score, just like the scoring distribution. And Corey wanted to add more points to the project readiness question. I would appreciate if like you have, Corey, if you have any suggestions on where like maybe we could take some points and add it to that question, that would be helpful. So yeah, we can open this up for any additional comments or suggestions. Yeah, so Justin.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have Corey looking to comment. We did receive additional comments on this section. So I'll go ahead and read from Rachel Marconi. Her comment is, can you provide a little additional information on why community engagement is 25% of points? Seems like project benefits, purpose, need, safety should be at least 50 to 70% of points that determine whether or not a project is worth funding.
So we can definitely move points around. I think our emphasis on community engagement was because more so the continuous community engagement is really part of the project. So making sure that there's a plan for that. It's something that we saw last cycle where they didn't really have a plan for continuous community engagement and like gathering that feedback and making those adjustments. And really the project, like a quick build project isn't really just building a project. It's like that community engagement process is part of project implementation, but we can totally think about adjusting the points based on these comments.
Thank you, Beverly. We do have Corey with his hand raised, looking to respond. So Corey, you are now muted.
My initial thought on where to find points from would be, maybe take a point from the potential for permanent project and the funding strategy, a point or two from each of those, and then add them to the project readiness. I feel like those are probably those other two could probably be in the same point level as like maintenance strategy. I feel like those are all three of those are kind of in line with each other, or maybe you combine them together and make it like 10 points for all of those, and then add some points to project readiness. I think that given what you guys found in the first phase of the pilot program, that adding more points to project readiness might help to solve some of that. I do agree that the community engagement is important, and that the evaluation the evaluation project should be very much considered as part of the application. That points should be associated with that. That the community engagement and evaluation of the project is what makes it a quick build project versus just a small infrastructure project. That ongoing community engagement throughout the process and the ongoing evaluation of the project is including that, which I think, yeah, you have that under performance metrics. So those are important components of what makes a quick build, just as much as the need and safety. But yeah, that was my thought, was maybe take some of the points from some of these other smaller categories at the bottom and beef up the project readiness.
Okay, so maybe make potential for permanent project and funding strategy worth 3 each, and then
add those points to the project readiness.
Out of 9. Like
yeah.
Okay.
Just a thought. You guys have to figure it out.
Okay, Beverly, that concludes all written comments and all questions and comments that we received during this time on this topic. We did receive one additional comment from Graham Wadsworth, who asks, what is the name of Lori's cat?
Lori, you'll
Very
have to
curious.
come on for that one.
Her name is Crystal, but I call her Monkey for some reason. But I'm going to have her certified as an emotional support animal because it helps me when I start getting a little bit heated to pet her to calm me down.
Thanks, Lori.
Thank you, Lori. And Beverly, that concludes all comments we've received during this time.
Okay, so it sounds like we can move points into that project readiness. That makes sense. I just want to make sure, like, if you see any other changes in here that you think need to be made for the scoring, please speak up now. Because this is the last workshop, so obviously we're going to make changes based on comments today, but this is really your chance to anything that you want to see in here that you think should change.
I missed Beverly, I missed the part on, I know Rachel commented on the I think it was the community engagement.
Yeah, so she thought that we were putting too much, like it's too much of the overall scores towards community engagement. And I kind of, at least from my perspective, and obviously I'm open to moving the points around. The reason there's so many points related to community engagement is because community engagement is really, like as Corey just said, what makes a quick build project. So like building the project isn't the full project. Like the project really is you build the project and then like you're engaging with the community to change the project. So it's really like a key part of implementation. So that was kind of the rationale behind putting so many points towards it, but obviously open to hearing other opinions and like where we could move points around.
So, and just to, Beverly, you might have mentioned this, but last cycle we didn't score the quick build apps using points. And this is it's kind of a bigger debate on if it's better to use specific points to score on things or not. The one advantage to not using specific points like this, particularly when it's a pilot program, is that we can look at the projects and kind of see that maybe they're a little bit weak somewhere, but the project seems really good, and we just need to work with them a little bit. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility in the evaluation process. But on the other hand, it's not as transparent as giving specific points like this. And because we weren't using specific points, it made it more difficult for the MPOs to consider quick builds in their program. So we heard that and understood that was an issue for the MPO. So we decided, okay, yeah, we can put points to specific things. So that's what we did. And you know, we tried to divvy them up appropriately. But with that said, it does take away a little bit of our flexibility in how we do our evaluation. Is that fair to say, Beverly, on how we? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is definitely an area that if the group feels like we got this wrong, that this is a good place that we would like feedback here.
We do have Rachel Marconi looking to comment at this time.
Hey guys, and I'm not trying to say that I don't think community engagement is an important part of project development at all, but it just seemed odd that that kind of cluster of things, you know, has 25 points, whereas evidence that the project will address an urgent safety need or that it will actually benefit non-motorized users just seemed odd weighting to me. That was, yeah. But I want to make clear, I fully support community engagement. I get the point of wanting to have that feedback loop. It was just a percentage of how much is spread at different things. And Lori, your point about, you know, there might be a just fantastic, outstanding project, but maybe the way they articulated their community engagement in their application wasn't, you know, or they don't have as robust of a community engagement plan as another project that actually isn't going to do much for non-motorized users, but they have this outstanding community engagement proposal. You know, that just didn't make sense to me why one of those would get, you know, possibly more points as a result.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Do you have any suggestions on what how we could distribute them differently?
I mean, I haven't put a lot of thought into it, and I recognize that you guys have, but I mean, just off the cuff, I would say, you know, reduce the community engagement points, those 3 categories, down to like 15 points and boost up either of those first 2 categories. I just was noticing the evidence that the project will quickly address a safety need. You know, how does that relate to the project readiness, and is there some duplication there? Or is project readiness just a basic screening criteria that you guys would have, and you maybe don't even assign as many points to that? It's just you guys say the project has to be ready to be implemented within X number of months, and if it's not, you're not a quick build. So just a few ideas, and I'm not proposing this as like.
Yeah, actually that's not a bad point. I mean, it would almost be a because to be honest, what happened last cycle is there was a few that we determined weren't eligible, that they weren't really quick builds, and they weren't evaluated. We just found them ineligible. So I think what Rachel is suggesting is that might almost be eligible or not eligible. So Corey, do you have any thoughts on that?
I kind of like having the points associated with it because it rewards projects that are, you know, it's almost like it rewards projects that have already been fully cooked. You know what I mean? Like it's not you're not going to have projects come in and immediately ask for time extensions and stuff. And it makes it clear to the applicants when they look at the scoring that this is important, whereas the ineligible or eligible, it doesn't necessarily make that as clear. Some applicants might not even see that, like, oh, if my project is determined that it can't be quickly implemented, that it's ineligible. I just think of putting points towards it communicates something to the applicants when they look at those points, and when they're forced to answer questions associated with that, it lets them know that that's a priority. So I don't know that, I mean, like I said, this is the first time we're really getting a chance to look at these. So it's hard to really piece them out and, you know,
So remember, we're adopting the guidelines.
I know.
So,
I assume that the project flexibility, where it says design alternatives, that could potentially change based on the comments that you've heard already, right, Beverly?
Yes, we can work on that wording.
Okay, I think that's fine. The performance metrics and the community engagement, I feel like there's a lot of like both of those are equally important as part of the evaluation process. So maybe some of like where it says evidence of planned continuous community engagement and performance metrics both should be, I would say, probably equal in point value because they're both important for that ongoing evaluation of the program, that there's community engagement and that there's also data collection and on-site observations that are being made, all of that kind of stuff that should be part of that evaluation and probably should be comparable in points. I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of all I can think of. Otherwise, it actually looks really good, to be honest. Like my first glance at it was like, oh, this seems consistent with what the program's goals are, and the points seem fair. It's still a pilot project. We're still figuring this stuff out, so we might get more lessons learned. And this is the first time we're doing points for it. So, if it's not perfect, we can fix it next time. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Great. Thanks, Corey. That's all really helpful. Justin, do we have any other people wishing to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Beverly. We did receive a couple extra written comments during this time. The first comes from Celia Mendez. They ask, is there a specific percentage of the available funds that will be awarded to quick builds, or will it depend on if you get any projects that are quick build worthy?
So we're proposing to do what we did last cycle and say that we'll award up to $7 million in quick build projects. And when we say up to, we mean we have we can determine whether we want to use all of that funding based on what we receive, which is what we did last cycle. Last cycle, we funded out of the $7 million that was available, we only funded $4.4 million worth of quick build projects, and the rest of it was rolled over back into the regular program.
Thank you, Beverly. The next written question comes from Kristen Holcomb. She asked, do unsuccessful quick build applications at the state level get kicked down to the MPO competition?
Yeah, so MPOs have the option. One of the reasons that we're scoring out of 100 this cycle is at the request of the MPOs, because it will be easier for them to integrate them into their program. So yes, the MPOs do have the option of funding unsuccessful projects in their component if they wish to. And hopefully, again, this scoring framework will make it easier for them to determine which projects they want to fund.
Next comes from Victoria Cacciatoria. They ask, with the increase in ATP funding and the increase in outreach about the quick build program, should there be a higher ceiling than $7 million?
We'll see if Lori has an opinion on that.
That's up to the stakeholders. I think our initial position would be we didn't even get enough for $7 million last time. So I think my first thought is I would like to keep it conservative at 7 million, but if people want to increase it or discuss it, then we can do that. Although, did we talk about that before, Beverly, at least that part of the quick build in a prior workshop?
We did briefly. So
Okay.
we've said that that's what we were proposing, to have $7 million available.
Okay, 'cause I hate to go back on a decision that we might have already made because, you know, it feels a little bit, yeah, go ahead.
I don't think that
Beverly.
we necessarily came to a final decision on it.
Okay.
I will say I agree with you, Lori. We want to be conservative because last cycle we didn't even receive enough to fund the full 7 million. And also just in comparison to what we received in the main ATP program, I mean, we knew in the main ATP just how many high quality projects we were unable to fund. Like there are hundreds of projects that are very high quality that we were not able to fund through the main ATP. So we're very conservative when it comes to things like this because we just know how much funding is really needed for, you know, the main statewide small urban and rural and MPO components.
Thank you. The next comes from Kristen Holcomb. She asks, can you confirm that design is an allowable expense? Quick builds often require the same level of design as capital projects.
Could Desiree or Trina chime in on this? If you guys could chime in on including design and construction. Sorry to put you on the spot, Desiree and Trina.
Thank you. We do have Desiree Fox.
Thanks, Desiree.
Hi. Yeah, just to confirm, yes, it can be used under construction, under your construction engineering, under the construction engineering portion that you'll set aside within the finance letter. So you can do design within the construction phase.
Thanks, Desiree.
Thank you. We have Corey Wilkerson with his hand raised at this time.
I think that the existing 7 million is fine, especially given that MPOs are now able to, with the adding of the point structure, and now makes it easier for MPOs that if they want to fund additional quick builds within the regions that they can. Perhaps you may want to get some input from the small urban and rural folks to see if they would like to see some quick builds potentially funded within that component. Obviously, that would be up to them and up to you guys. But otherwise, I think that the 7 million is probably appropriate. We'll kind of see what we get. If we get a lot better applications this cycle, then maybe we can consider increasing that for the next cycle. But I think that with the flexibility that MPOs can fund these projects as well, I think that that can kind of addresses that a little bit, and we should be okay.
Thanks, Corey.
The next written question came from Kristen Holcomb. They asked, curious if Corey can explain how SCAG will deal with unsuccessful state applications at the local level. How will they compete?
We're still working on our regional guidelines, but currently what we've kind of tentatively discussed is we do a separate we've done in the past, we've done a separate call for projects that included quick builds. With this round, we're more leaning towards just a set aside. But basically, you know, with the 100-point scale, we can have quick builds funded throughout our region using the same, you know, the same points as we would for all the other project types. But we are talking about a set aside specifically for quick builds, non-infrastructure and planning projects on this cycle and kind of see how it goes. But that's still, we haven't finalized our guidelines yet. Our guidelines will be adopted in April, and it's based on a lot of feedback from our county transportation commissions. They all they have staff that works on that with me together. So.
Thanks, Corey.
Trevor, they're not seeing anything else at this time.
Beverly?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to answer Corey's earlier question about who we consulted with and on our small group on this. And I'll tell you one reason that we are talking about this at our very last workshop is that, well, first let me go back. We, SFMTA helped us some because they have implemented lots and lots and lots of quick builds. And they do not apply to our program for quick builds. They fund them themselves. So they were kind of a unbiased party and somewhat of our mentors in putting together this quick build. So first we met with them, and they were the ones that kind of pointed out that that the delivery method was part of our issue, is that we needed to work on that in our guidelines. Then we were trying to put together the small group, and we wanted actual implementers, and we were reaching out to implementers that we thought could help us, and we could not get anybody interested in being on our small group. So we went with Jonathan Matz of Safe Routes to Schools was on our group, and then it was Trina, Desiree, Emily, and Summer from Caltrans, and then we had some Caltrans district people, Tammy Quigley from District 2, and Beverly, I can't remember the other names right now.
We had unfortunately I can't remember their names. So we had someone from District 7 and someone from District 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that covers it. We also had Jonathan Matz. I'm not sure if you. Okay.
Yeah. So that's who was on our small group. They helped us, so it's not a secret. It wasn't my cat Crystal. That's who was on our group. And we at a certain point, because we were struggling to find implementers that could participate, we had to just go with who could help us, which was primarily Caltrans people, so we could get this done before we had to adopt the guidelines.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lori. We do have Corey with his hand raised.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Lori. In cycle 5, SCAG had participated in that group that kind of helped develop the initial quick builds, because SCAG is an implementer of quick build projects and has a lot of understanding and knowledge behind that. I'd appreciate it if we could be included in in those committees in the future, we
Corey,
would like to provide input.
okay, we can do that, but then I'll tell you, if SCAG is there, we have to have every other MPO and every other RTPA, and then we might as well just do it with the full group. So if that's the will, then that's what we will do next time.
Yeah, if there's other MPOs that are implementers of quick build projects, then I would agree that that would be appropriate. But if they're not direct implementers of these types of projects, then it might not make as much sense. They might not have as much understanding on what it takes to actually deliver these projects. And I think that might be what SCAG is unique on.
I would also say that we did not preclude anyone from giving comments at any time on quick builds. There wasn't, you could have commented at any time on anything on the guidelines.
I did, yeah, actually, I did request that the quick build guidelines be posted on the website to allow us to review these beforehand, before today's meeting, so that we could provide additional comments. Unfortunately, when I checked the website yesterday, those still hadn't been posted yet. So this is, unfortunately, has been the first time we've been able to actually see this stuff and to provide comments. And we know that, as you know, this is something that's important to us. So it is something that we're very much invested in and are passionate about, and would like to see this pilot program succeed. So thank you for that.
Okay, well then go ahead and comment now. Go ahead and you can put.
I feel like the comments we provided are the comments that we would provide if we as we review these. So thank you for that. It is something that's important to our agency. It's something that is important to our region and our stakeholders. So thank you for that.
I would say it's important to us and a lot of others as well.
Not seeing any other public comment at this time.
Okay, well, I think we can move on to kind of our wrap up for the meeting. So I don't know, before we do that, I don't know, Lori, if you want to take any final public comments before we move into action items.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
we should do that.
Okay, yeah, so I guess if anyone has any final questions or comments, they can provide them now. And again, we will take back the feedback we got today and make some adjustments to the quick vote guidelines. And so please, just any questions or comments you have, you can provide them now. And again, this is our last workshop for cycle 6.
Thank you, Beverly. We have received one written comment so far from Anna Ruddy. They ask, is the scoring rubric available for regular infrastructure projects, not quick build? Please remind me if that's still in process due to feedback.
So those have not been finalized yet. So we're working on finalizing those based on our last workshop, and they will be posted. I think we'll have them finalized at least when we, at the same time that we do the call for projects around March 16th. So they should be available soon, and they should be available when the call for projects goes out.
From Kristen Holcomb, she comments, thank you to the CTC and Caltrans for providing the opportunity for feedback. From Michael Williams, I'd like to thank Justin, on behalf of the group, for doing such a fantastic job of moderating the Q&A over the series of workshops. Well done and very helpful. And I promise that's a legitimate comment.
Just to add on to that, myself, Lori, and Alika are very grateful for Justin's help with these workshops. He's done such an amazing job, and as we always say, he's a very calming presence on these calls, especially when they can get kind of intense. So thank you so much, Justin, for your help.
Not a problem. Happy to help. Not seeing any additional comment at this time.
Okay, I guess we can move into action items. So, Alika, if you want to walk us, oh, there's Lori.
Oh, we can, I'll come back on at the very end.
You sure? Okay.
All right, Alika, go for it.
Thanks, Beverly. Okay, so as always, if I miss anything, please let me know. So the first thing I have on our list is to add additional language to the quick build examples to clearly differentiate, infrastructure and quick build projects. The next one is to revise project layout plans language to state something along the lines of encourage at least one alternative layout instead of requiring it. The third one I have is to add the photo release waivers language to the reporting section, or at least reference the section in the guidelines that already discusses this. And then the final one that I have is possible adjustments to the scoring breakdown for the quick build projects. And
thanks,
I don't
Alika.
know, Justin. Oh yeah, and Justin, I don't know if anyone's written in stating anything that I've missed.
Alika, not seeing anything as of now.
Great, thanks, Justin.
Yeah, and that's what I had as well as mine. But if we missed anything, you can feel free to email us and we can add it to our list. Thanks so much, Alika, for tracking those today.
So I just want to give my final comments and maybe respond a bit to what Corey said about us not posting the quick build guidelines ahead of time. Along with thanking Justin, I have to thank Alika and Beverly, because if those of you that have been involved with the ATP for over multiple cycles should realize that this is by far the most organized and transparent workshop process that we've done. A couple cycles ago, it was primarily me running the program, and I felt lucky if I got anything out a half an hour before the workshop started. So I will acknowledge that maybe we said that we would have the quick build part section up earlier, but I will tell you, we have posted everything. We have posted our action items, everything we can ahead of time. I think that we have, and when I mean we, I mostly mean Beverly and Alika, have done an excellent job at making sure that everyone knows what's going on in our guidelines, better than we have done in any past cycles. So I want to acknowledge that, knowing that we can always do better. But I think we've done, the team has done a great job this cycle. So I want to say that. And with that acknowledged, while this is our last workshop, there's still an opportunity to comment until the guidelines are adopted at the March meeting. So if anyone wants to send letters or comment at the meeting, then feel free to do that. And lastly, I want to thank all of you, the stakeholders, for participating in all of these workshops. I know it is a lot of time and energy to participate and be thinking through all of the guidelines. And so thank you for always helping us every cycle as we try every cycle to improve the program and make it the best that it can be. And that is not just us, that's all of you. And I want to make sure that I thank Caltrans too, particularly Trina, Desiree, Emily, and Summer. I hope I didn't forget anyone because they are our true partners in the program and working with us to always be making sure that the program is more clear, more understandable, and as implementable as it can be for the applicants. And that was all I had to say. So I don't know if anyone else has any last comments, but with that, so I'll turn it to you, Justin, if anybody else has any comments.
Thank you, Lori. I'll give it a few moments. Up first, we have, with their hand raised, Corey Wilkerson.
Okay.
Just to mirror what Lori said, I do really appreciate all the work that that Beverly and Alika. Justin is the voice of these meetings, and it's always impressive how well he handles everything. And I know that there's so many moving pieces with this program and so much stuff going on that it's hard to do it all perfect. And none of us expect perfection from any of you guys. We know that you guys have a very limited team over there that's running this program, and that we appreciate how and I've heard this from our county transportation commissioners as well, that we really do appreciate how transparent this program is, especially compared to a lot of the other programs, and how well it's handled. And then I know that it's not an easy process, and I'm very thankful for Monkey for providing some comfort to Lori when she has to deal with pushy assholes like me. So thank you guys very much for everything you guys do with the program. I know that it's hard, that it's stressful, and that it's frustrating. Just know that we very much appreciate how hard all of you work, and how invested you guys are in this program, and the work that you guys put in, because it really does make for a better program, especially compared to pretty much any other program that I've seen. So thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Corey.
Not seeing anyone else looking to make comment at this time.
Okay, well, then we are done. So like we have in the past, we will post our action items, and you will see the guidelines posted with the meeting book items for the March meeting. So you'll see them there if you want to just check them out one last time and make sure that we caught everything that we said we would do. And again, thank you, everyone, and we will see you in a future meeting. So goodbye, everybody.